I went from I reject it, to I deny it, to I embrace it. These are the words of Thomas Ménager, a deputy of the Rassemblement National, the national rally, regarding his homosexuality, and they perfectly encapsulate the evolution of the relationship between the French far-right, or the far-right in general, and gay people. Just to give you a little bit of context, in 2011, Marine Le Pen took the lead of what was then called the Front National, the National Front, a far-right political party previously led by her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen. Since then, the party changed its name to Rassemblement National, RN, and the number of members who are openly gay has steadily increased. The French LGBTQ+ media Têtu estimated that 20 to 25 out of 89 RN deputies are gay. Among them you have Sébastien Chenu, the vice president of the party, Jean-Philippe Tanguy, the deputy chairman of the parliamentary group. Then you have Julien Audeud, the spokesperson of the party, who's not gay but who has appeared shirtless on the cover of Têtu, the media I was referencing earlier. For quite some time, even Marine Le Pen was rumored to have a relationship with her female best friend, Ingrid, who lives with her, but she quickly shut down the rumors. And finally, Thomas Ménager, who was mentioned above, recently came out in a book written by journalist Sonia Tir on being LGBT in politics. Tir said that the French right refused to talk to her about homosexuality in their party, but the far-right didn't. So is the French far-right, or the far-right in general, gay-friendly now? Why are far-right parties around the world appealing to gay people? So in this video, I want to first explore the reasons why gay people increasingly vote for and join the far-right. I want to show that there have always been gay people in far-right movements. I want to introduce the concept of homonationalism and security-based hedonism. And finally, I want to show how the far-right has reduced minority rights to a matter of security, safety. They push the narrative that freedom of certain minority groups, gay people and women for example, can only be achieved through the punishment of other minority groups. Arabs, migrants, etc. By the way, this video is produced in the context of the far-right gaining ground in France, and us potentially having a far-right prime minister in a few weeks. I'm primarily going to focus on France in this video, but I will also use other examples, and to be honest, the things I'm gonna talk about are pretty universal, so yeah. Okay, let's go. Part 1, the far-right aesthetic. Historically, the far-right hasn't been very nice towards gay people. They never supported the expansion of LGBTQ+ rights, quite the contrary. However, despite being openly homophobic, far-right parties managed to get the attention of gay men in two different ways. First, the historical underrepresentation of women in those parties create a homosocial environment that gay people can enjoy. And the second thing is that far-right parties convey a specific aesthetic that can be appealing to gay men. That of the military, with leagues and the uniform. You can see that on the images of fascist leagues between the First and the Second World War. This picture, for example, represents the Francistes, a movement inspired by Mussolini and founded by Marcel Bucard in the 1930s. Bucard was a husband and a father, but he lived a secret life as a closeted gay man. The popular far-right monarchist party Action Française, so French Action, founded at the beginning of the 20th century and led by Charles Maurras, also had a number of gay men in its ranks, among them Robert Brasillac, Pierre Gachotte, François Santin, or Daniel Cordier. So homosocialism, which means being surrounded by mostly men, and homoeroticism could be two factors that draw gay people to the far right. And it's important to keep in mind that in societies in which gay people lack agency, those resistance movements were a space where gay people could quickly gain power as long as they remained closeted. In fact, Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of the National Front and the father of Marine Le Pen, said in 1995, quote, "I have to admit that there must be homosexuals in the party, but there aren't any. We tell to bugger off." End of the quote. Now, according to journalist and founder of France ACT UP Didier Lestrade, the reason why so many gay men join the far right despite its homophobia is that those gay men hate their queerness. And parties, both on the left and on the right, love gay people who hate being gay. He adds, quote, "The interest gay people have for the far right is motivated by a taste for the forbidden. It's the thing that will horrify your friends when you'll tell them next time you see them at the restaurant. It will feed the rumors and make you feel so cool because people will think you're truly radical. You'll have a new status, more dangerous and bold. Part 2. Homonationalism. Homonationalism, which is the combination of homosexuality and nationalism, describes the use of LGBTQ+ rights by states or political movements to justify nationalist, often Islamophobic or xenophobic policies. The term was popularized by queer theorist Jasbir Puar in her 2007 book, Terrorist Assemblages, Homonationalism in Queer Times. So after the 9/11 attacks, a moral binary between the liberal, pro-human rights West and the barbarous, archaic Middle East was established in order to legitimate revenge. In the following decades, the disastrous wars happening in the Middle East were approached through this binary: democracy and freedom against evil terrorism. The West positioned itself as the champion of human rights, specifically women's rights. It sometimes collaborated or put pressure on Middle Eastern states to expand the rights of women and their representation. This is called state feminism. But it's quite unstable because it really depends on who is in power and who's willing to collaborate. And to be honest, it is perceived by many locals as Western soft power in action. Now, if the West can't collaborate with Middle Eastern governments, they can still utilize women's rights to legitimize deadly attacks, often disrupting grassroots work done by local feminists with or without the help of UN organizations. So this dynamic has been documented for quite some time now. We can say that it started with Hillary Clinton's speech, quote, "Women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights," at the UN Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995. And we saw this dynamic repeated quite recently with all those liberal feminists who have shown support for female Israeli hostages, but barely any support for the thousands of Palestinian women killed or hurt. Today, this instrumentalization extends to gay people. You know, in the past decade, many countries, liberal countries around the world, have given gay people the right to marry. And while this was such a major step forward, many were afraid that this would lead to the normalization of gay rights, meaning its depoliticization. Before that legislation, gay people could claim their existence through capitalist consumption in the form of pinkwashing. But the legislations allowed them to also claim their existence by embracing a more traditional form of relationship. So they could now be just like the other consumerist nuclear families and live happily ever after. So the normalization of gay rights means that it's easier for politicians to play the gay-friendly card, since it doesn't have to be political. It's not as controversial as it used to be. You can be pro-gay rights and pro-capitalism. You can be pro-gay rights and pro-nuclear family. Normalization allows politicians to instrumentalize gay rights to push for their agenda at the expense of broader social justice and inclusion. They did it with women's rights, and now they do it with gay rights. But I have a question. Why did that normalization happen so naturally? Why weren't there any forms of resistance to that normalization? So we're gonna get a bit technical right now, but please stay with me. So, Jasbir Puar, the person who coined the term homonationalism, looked at the production of academic work on LGBTQ+ rights and feminism, as well as the content and views shared by feminist and LGBTQ+ organizations. And she noticed something. They noticed that their analysis tended to only use one framework, a feminist framework or a queer framework, and that other frameworks of analysis like an anti-racist perspective or an anti-colonial perspective or an anti-military perspective were neglected. Now, only prioritizing one framework of analysis meant that these scholars and these activists subconsciously created a discourse that could lead to racist or imperialist conclusions. What do I mean by that? Well, if you want an example of that, you can watch my video on how liberal feminism turns into authoritarianism. To explain it briefly, in that video I showed that liberal feminists don't necessarily include class or race or imperialism in the way they approach social issues, like male violence, for example. They only look at the problem through a gender lens, so they see male violence as the product of a bad education, and they want men to behave and be educated like girls, so to be docile and sweet like girls. They fail to understand that male violence can also be the product of poverty, of imperialism, because they only adopt one framework of analysis. It's like trying to solve a Sudoku by only looking at the central square. I've been obsessed with Sudokus lately, and while it's okay if I mess up my Sudoku, you can't mess up social issues like that. We have to embrace the complexity that comes with approaching an issue through different frameworks, because that's the only way to produce a comprehensive analysis, one that is strong, that cannot be challenged and therefore cannot be instrumentalized. So liberal governments tend to focus on the enemy outside, oftentimes the Middle East or China. But nationalist candidates tend to be more interested in the enemy within, so they apply the same framework of the civilized versus the uncivilized, but on a national level. When it comes to gay rights or women's rights, the enemy within are migrants and Western Muslim people who are portrayed as dangerous and backwards. See, look at this tweet from Marine Le Pen, the founder of the National Rally. The homophobia which is developing in our country has its main origin in the rise of Islamist fundamentalism. Am I once again going to be the only one to dare to say it? Give us the names of the attackers. End of the quote. That was the first time Le Pen took a position against homophobia. I mean, her party was strictly opposed to gay marriage, before changing its position recently as they understood the potential of homonationalism. But Le Pen is not the first politician to do that. In the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, the leader of the Party for Freedom, the largest party in parliament, has used this strategy for a while now. Wilders frequently says that Islam poses a threat to LGBTQ+ rights, using this as a justification for his anti-Islam policies. Long before him, Pim Fortuyn, another Dutch politician, did pretty much the same thing. He strongly opposed Islam, but openly supported gay rights. And he was assassinated in 2002 by a left-wing activist because of his xenophobic views. So the message is clear. Now that gay rights aren't as controversial as they used to be, far-right politicians feel like it's safe to appropriate the cause and use it for electoral purposes. As a result, more far-right politicians feel comfortable coming out as gay, and more gay people feel represented by the party. Part 3. Security-based hedonism. Quote, I have nothing against, since they often are the most courageous, while many homosexuals quietly live their lives. Marine sees homosexuality in our society as a right to detachment. The fact that you can be at ease with your identity without turning it into a big deal or something that defines you for the rest of your life. And that speaks to a lot of French homosexuals. These were the words of Jean-Philippe Tanguy, deputy chairman of the National Rally Group, and openly gay. The right to detachment, to live one's life at ease with oneself, without having to care for the rest of the community, without having to care about any minority group, or anyone really. But at what cost though? If homophobia, a systemic issue which permeated every structure of our society, schools, corporations, the home, so if that issue isn't properly tackled by our institutions, how do we make gay people feel safe and equal? By punishing those we perceive as a threat. It's as simple as that. Far-right parties established that migrants and Muslim people are threats to the well-being of gay people, so they will do everything in their power to make their lives miserable, to make them feel like they are not welcome here. And as soon as they'll complain about being discriminated against at work, in housing, etc., they'll tell them that if they are not happy here, they can go elsewhere. And they will. Thousands of skilled Muslim workers have left France. I have a friend who did that 2 years ago because nobody would give her a job in France. And if, on top of complaining, you protest or disengage from all the institutions that kept you and your parents poor and stigmatized, we'll use you as proof that you don't want to integrate, and as soon as you'll do something illegal, we'll put you in jail. And that's it. People don't want to see this reality. They don't want to empathize with those people, and to be fair, no one is encouraging them to do so. The far-right unleashes racist effects and the media amplify them. It blocks empathy, it cancels humanist values. It becomes exciting to be racist. It's exciting to gather around those in power and pick a group to bully until they shut up and disappear. Who's a threat to gay people? Who's a threat to women? Statistically, it's not migrants or Muslim. For gay people, for women, the discrimination starts at home, with the parents. It continues at school, it continues in the workplace, in sports, in art. It happens in the streets as well, it's true, and it can be very scary sometimes. But when I think about it, and I'm gonna ask you to do the same thing as me, to take a moment and think back on those moments where you felt scared or unsafe. And I know it's tempting to only think about the times where you were in public or in the streets, because that's what we've been told. We've been told that we should fear the outside, not what's happening on the inside, in the spaces where we're surrounded with family or people we know. But please try to remove that bias and honestly think about all the times you felt unsafe, regardless of the environment. So let me give you some examples. What truly scared me growing up was some men at my small tennis club in the countryside, specifically when they said things like, that's the position we do when she really doesn't want to have sex, ha ha ha. Or when someone said, we need to find him an African woman, referring to a guy who had harassed multiple women, teenagers and adults. Or when one of my female tennis colleagues complained several times that that very guy had harassed her and was waiting for her outside after her lessons, and all they did was put a light outside. I felt scared and unsafe when I would see men drink a lot of alcohol to the point where they couldn't really control themselves anymore, and I knew that their girlfriends or wives would have to deal with that at home. And also, what scares me today are the messages I receive from guys called Michael or James or user 76543 telling me that they're going to rape me or put a dagger into feminism, or the fact that I can't share online the public events I do without fearing that male haters or stalkers will come. It has happened in the past, and it's absolutely terrifying. Editing Alice here, I realized that I didn't even talk about the really bad things, but it made me think of a post Anna Toumazov, a French feminist, shared recently. She was replying to a guy who said that, quote, I think I have rarely been so happy in my life. To think that soon I will almost no longer be afraid when my little sister goes outside, finally. He was saying that in reference to the fact that the far right might be in power very soon, and Anna replied, funny to read your level of ignorance, because if I dropped the list of first names of the men with whom I had disappointments, by which I mean more serious than street harassment, I think you'll feel like you're reading the New Testament. Obviously in the comment section of that post, a lot of people shared the names of the people they had disappointments with, and yeah, they pretty much all fitted in the New Testament. But anyway, that was just a little parenthesis there. Let's go back to the video, let's go back to the serious analysis. Now, does that make me want to limit the freedoms of heterosexual men or impose a curfew on them? Like, after 9 p.m, no more men outside? And you know what? We'll put cameras everywhere. Cameras in the home, cameras in my tennis club. We'll record everything. That is security-based hedonism. But gosh, I do not want that. It's the lazy option. And the lazy option always come with bad consequences down the line. I'm sure Michael or James, and I'm sorry to all the Michael and James who are really nice guys, not all Michaels and James, but anyway, I'm sure the male haters in my comment sections would reject the idea of having their freedoms taken away from them for the safety of women and gay people. Well, that's what far-right parties want to do with ethnic minorities. With the minority. And I know most far-right supporters simply don't care about minorities, and no logical argument will change that. I'm fine with it. I grew up around them, I know so many of them, and I know that sometimes no argument will change their mind. But today I'm talking to women, I'm talking to gay people who've been seduced by the far-right promises of safety. Actually, I've talked to some of those women at the National Rally event organized close to where I grew up, and one teenage girl told me that she wanted to feel safe as a woman, which is something I can totally empathize with. But when I asked her what would the National Rally do to make her feel safe, she said, lower immigration and be tougher on crime. And so when I told her that in France, 79% of rape are committed by someone the victim knew, she looked kind of surprised. She didn't know what to say. She smiled and she looked back to her friend. I mean, no, far-right parties are not gay-friendly or women-friendly. They systematically oppose women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights. I mean, again, recently, gay people were attacked in Paris by members of a far-right group. And one of the guys said that in 3 weeks, he'd be able to do that, to attack gay people. Again, referencing the fact that the far-right might be in power in France soon. So no, the far-right won't protect gay people. And sure, they can attract primarily white gay men and white women who share the party's anti-immigration and xenophobic views. But I still believe that it's crucial to point out the mechanisms of the far-right's instrumentalization of LGBTQ+ rights, as I did in this video. Because I still believe that racist effects can be turned into humanist effects if we rely on the real, on facts, on data, on testimonies, instead of relying on fear and misinformation like the far right systematically does. So that's it for today. It's a topic that is very, very dear to my heart because, as I told you, I grew up around many far-right people, many people who turn to the far right because of misplaced frustrations or overt racism and xenophobia. I do love and care about some of those people, and I have those conversations with them as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. As always, the conversation continues in the comment section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe if it's not already done. I would like to say thank you to my patrons for their support, and a special thank to top tier patrons: Dominique, Yelan, B, parenthesis, Nick, Tinfoil Pancakes, Trogdor the Burninator, Brandon, James, Ujwal, Pablo, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Ivan, Toki, Koriji, Kodrina, Tristan, Patricia, Lenny, Christopher, Donage, Alex, Manuel, Christopher France, and Perry, and thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. Finally, I need to talk to you about the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to grow your presence online. They give you a bunch of tools to create your ideal websites. So this is mine so far, Alice Capelle. I use it as a platform to kind of show all the work that I do on YouTube, my contributions, but also my book. I also added all my social media accounts. You also have analytical tools. You can run effective email campaigns. On their website, you can also get advice from professionals on how to build your website, etc. So many things you can do. So if you're interested in it, if you want to try it out, then go to squarespace.com to get a free trial. And once you're ready to go public, then you can go to squarespace.com/AliceCapelle to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring the video. And yeah, that's it. Salut!